right, Ferdy, welcome to Susu Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
It's honestly, so we sort of reached out to you a while ago, didn't we? And we were not able to make it work back then. What's changed since then? How come you have our time to do?
No, I remember going back to that conversation. Did I give a time?
You did
and
not
I know you
even
gave,
respond.
No, I remember you gave a couple of options. I was like,
Yes.
okay, let me quickly respond. And you was like, okay, I'm still recording. That's okay, good. Sorry about that, but I think it's happening now. And
It's fantastic. I think it's a great time. And I really want us to delve into the conversation of, Ferdy's journey and some of the interesting things that you're working on right now. Because you are multifaceted, aren't you? You've got your hands into a lot of things. And I always find it fascinating when I'm speaking to entrepreneurs who are very fluid in their expression of their talent in different mediums. And I'm always very fascinated as to how you manage it all. And that's always a little bit of a contradiction because myself, I've got my hands in a few things. But what I've managed to do is I've put my hands in things that are sort of interconnected. Yes. Somehow, right? So I'm always interested to find out how you've sort of come about your own personal journey and how you make it work for you. But before we do that, what I like to traditionally do is go back to the beginning. Back to the beginning. Yeah. How did Ferdy come about? Tell me a little bit about your childhood. The making of Ferdy.
Well, I like to say I'm the third first, and that means the third child, but the first son.
Interesting.
So 5 other siblings. So we're 6. We grew up in Port Harcourt. My father, my mom. My mom is a teacher, now retired, so was a teacher. My father was working with the federal government. He worked, and he was one that was oftentimes posted outside the state. So, sometimes we'll go like a year and not have him around. So my childhood, his presence was very, very absent. Right? There's a word like that. He was few and far between having him around, but he did a lot more traveling. But I think that I have 4 sisters, and then next to where we lived was my grandmom and my cousins. My cousins were also three ladies, older ladies. So I kind of like saw life through that very, very multicultural point of view, right? I had my extended family living just next door to us. And I also had my cousins, my grandmom. And my grandmom was very, very colorful. She was very imposing. She was highly political. She was very opinionated. I wouldn't say, but she had very, very strong views about everything. And I think that she forced us to have conversations. She would tell us all kinds of stories. The Civil War, she would tell us about the men she dated, and she would tell us about the places she worked before she retired.
Grandma had gist.
No, she had a lot of gist. And a few times she would light up the cigarette and we'd be looking at her. She had a gun and she said she was not afraid of using it, right? So like that, she was a whole sitcom all by herself, right? And my mom was also someone who was, she's very loving. And I saw that my mom had this very strong sense of wanting to give us the best and always wanting to, many times I would say, extend herself, right, over and over again. It was in a sense, now I think about the word I could possibly use, she idolized her children. And it was as though her meaning and her significance was tied to the fact that she were her children. So she had a lot of burden if anybody was not coming just as well. She agonized over everything, your exams, there was all of that thing. And being a teacher, there was also a sense that they had this subtle thing going on about the teachers and their children. So I think that part was also part of that. But it was, Port Harcourt back in the day was called the Garden City. So I think it wasn't the way it is now. It had a lot more serenity to it. I remember taking works on a street where there are lots of trees. And I remember gardens around and nice flowers. I remember climbing trees, lots of it, and jumping over and over again. The neighborhood was sort of like a civil servant type neighborhood. So we had lots of civil servants working there. There was lots of literature. I remember as early as 6, 7, I was very avid with reading. I read everything there was to read, whether it was Chinua Achebe or Wole Soyinka, or whether it was Maramaba. There were too many ideas, right? We had this African writer series. So I'll stumble on them, Our Kwama, Weep Not Child. Like, if you we just happened to have that. And I think...
Who instilled that love for reading in you?
I think that even my mom read a lot. She read a lot of Shakespeare, and she even told me the name Ferdinand, which is the name she eventually gave me, was a name she stumbled on in The Tempest, written by Shakespeare. So there was a sense that she loved literature. And I think there was a bit of that. Then one of my elder cousins read a lot. I mean, I'm even thinking now that when I started joining the debate club, she was already in the debate club. So I remember her working on my presentation, ultimate timekeeper, co-debater, something like that, right? I remember reading through those lines, memorizing everything. So I was very, very well shaped by that as well. And then when I started to engage life, I was exposed to fiction. I read quite a lot of fiction, and then my older years, I started to explore even Western fiction, other writers, Sidney Sheldon, people like John Grisham, there are quite a lot of those other guys, even Dan Brown, and even some Christian literature like Frank Peretti, and Ted Dekker. There were a lot of Francine Rivers. So there was just this exploration. Literature was part of every of my evolution, whether it was through even coming from a cultural context to moving into when I started to explore religion, and even when I started to explore business and fiction, right, and innovation. Literature followed me through that. I'm still pretty much a writer at heart. I really, I'm working on a couple of fiction that I just don't know when I'm going to finish them, right? I'm even adapting them now to screen for film, but at the time they came to me as ideas for movies. So my growing up was very, very rich, not in the way of money, but in the way of experience, in the way of culture. There was just too much. My grandmom was Rivers, my mom was Delta, so we had like very multicultural way, and they were not just passive; they were very involved. So I remember having my mom would always host the people from my part of town to our house for meetings and parties. They would dance, and they would have this like endless moment. I'm like, okay, this is what it means to be an adult, right? So can't wait to join them, right? My granny was very political. She was I thinking about it now. She was in NRC.
Interesting. So the acronym
is I think it's Nigerian Republic Congress. It was the party that ran against Abiola. Abiola at the time was SDP. So I was very young. I was maybe 7 or 8, but I remember everything. I remember the conversation between Abiola and Tofa, and that where we were at the time, NRC won Rivers State, but Abiola won at the SDP level. So I couldn't understand why we're not supporting Abiola at the time, why my grandma was supporting Tofa, but she grew up in Kano. Okay. So she was very northern in the way of, she related very comfortably and easily with the northern people. So I think I saw that she joined the Red Cross. I remember every Independence Day, 1st October, we'll go to the stadium to watch her march, and we'll stand by the side and wait while she's marching. Right.
So what do you mean by matching?
So there is this parade.
It's a march of the people. So I was even going to ask, maybe that's one of the reasons why Grandma was so imposing as a personality, because to be involved in politics as a woman in those days, you had to have some gumption, no?
Yes, quite a bit of that. But I also think she was educated, and that gave her an advantage relative to the women of her age at the time. I can remember a lot of educated women amongst some of her friends who would come to the house, but for herself and her elder sister, they were very, very, they had some kind of, they had a very sophisticated worldview of the world. I mean, religion was part of it, but it wasn't something that removed you from doing life. It was rather something that empowered you to do life more effectively, right? So I think that thinking about it now, I really do know that there were episodes of just, now, if I connect my passion to politics, I would say I had that introduction back then. My mom was very, very intentional about having us build a spiritual foundation. I mean, she would look for any place where there was fervency and there was culture. She didn't just want any type of religion or superstition. She wanted a practical type of faith. I remember sometimes she would say, I went to this church, I love their music. They sang really nice worship music, and then we'll be in. Right? So, and I got exposed to that type of very an American idea of the gospel through. I mean, I started watching a lot of T.D. Jakes, Kenneth Hagin as early as I was maybe 12, 13, 14. So by 17, I had heard them, and I was now looking for something else. But I think I was shaped very much by all of these interactions.
So, in Dad's absence, how do you think that has probably shaped you today? Because it sounds like Mum was very hands-on. You know, she was very intentional. Grandma was very present. Cousins very close by, very close reach. How did Dad's absence and the times perhaps that he wasn't always available, how do you think that has shaped you in terms of your journey today?
Well, I think at some point in my childhood, I don't think I was well adjusted to the idea. I always had that relational longing need, right, of always wanting to. So I remember most of secondary school, when you go to school and you find some dads who come look for their kids, right? And it was then I started to realize that I missed something, right? I didn't now know, but going back, I think that there was that sense of having to. So by the time he was settling into the family, I had grown used to not having to run an idea by anyone. So there was a sense that built into me a sense of independence. But I also think that underneath all that independence and the sense of I would figure it out on my own was maybe a level of crack or two of also sometimes wanting to have some kind of validation. So it was a complicated bag, but I think it made me in the way that I'm very, very driven. I'm very, very self-reliant. And sometimes I don't know how to ask for help. I don't know that you should, right? And you carry on. And sometimes, but you're also not impacted just myself, but even my siblings. There's a way that I think we became ourselves, our best friends, our support system, having to always draw from each other, right? And I think that was also part of how that impacted. As a father now, I am being a bit more intentional in how I raise my children so that they are more in touch with their feelings and more back in the day it was a little bit of a struggle. I didn't like when kids would cry and cry and cry, but now I'm just sort of like having to say, how do I love them and give them what I never had. And sometimes I'm still drawing from a vacuum, like they're still drawing from a void, trying to figure things out. I remember this conversation with my wife. Her father used to make plantain. She said he used to fry plantains in the morning or Saturday mornings, right? And he could easily back her sibling or the younger one. And she had this very great idea where he was making food and all of those things. I don't have those ideas, right? So when we got married, my own idea was more defined by my void. So I remember at the time she would ask questions that, do you ever think of trying to make any meal? I'd rather go buy the meal. I'd rather go buy it. But I think there was something she wanted to have, that bond of, okay, watching the father make something and the kids are happy. But because and she told me once that sometimes because there isn't a lot to draw from, if I do 10%, I would feel like, oh, that was so exhausting. I've done a lot today, right? And she was like, that's just 10 of 100, right? But I was now more intentional not to fall short of the way that I parent, and not having to be looking at how is this done, right? In a sense, but I'm very close to my boys, right? They love to play. I mean, for them, I'm like one big tree, like that they want to climb, and I mean, I see the way they enjoy that, But it's not something that I ever had. So I think if that's something that I have achieved, I'll be happy.
Is that still here?
No, he passed. I think about 3 years ago. About 3 years ago now he passed. But his latter days were filled with contemplation, reflection, and just also trying to. But I do know that he didn't know any other way on how to parent, right? And I think for most of the men his age, they would rather the work than the presence. So we're only learning now that presence is the greatest gift you can give to a child. But it's because even having a physically present father who is emotionally absent, and there's still that sense of loss that a child will have to grapple with, and it impacts on them on a level or two. Right?
Do you miss Dad?
Well,
and I asked that not necessarily now, but in the days when he was alive but absent. Did you miss him?
I don't know. Honestly, I think that it's hard to say, but at some point I warmed up to the idea of wanting to intentionally build a relationship, right? But he was a bit transactional. If you wanted something done and he could do it, let's have a conversation. It wasn't a guy for talks like how's it going? Like it has to be substantial. I mean, it has to be like something, So I think he didn't know how to work through that, right? And on the other hand, I also knew that somehow he has a way of showing his own love that might not necessarily be the way I understood it. He might just get a text message, just checking up, right? And that's it. I mean, for someone his type, that those words would have come out from a very deep place, right? And they weigh more than they carry just as much weight as words would say.
That's interesting. Is Mum still here?
Oh, very much. Very much.
Mum sounds amazing.
She is. I mean, my mom is a Civil War impacted daughter. So, we grew up in Delta State is where I'm from. And back in the day, the area of Delta State where I'm from, it's the Igbo part, right? And so during the Civil War, we were one of the most exposed or attacked, because if you're coming all the way from Benin or the Midwestern states, from places like Lagos, or you're getting first to the Delta Igbos before you even get to Onitsha, and then cross into the east. So we're a border tribe. I mean, you have stories like a very close village called Asaba. The military men sort of like assembled all the men in the village and shot all of them. So we say things like Wanya Asaba, like strong Asaba women, because there were a generation of children raised only by the mothers. But that was the Civil War. And a lot of them suffered trauma that was unprocessed and unresolved. And even coming to life, most of them dealt with all kinds of anxieties that they couldn't quite deal with, because the cause of that anxieties were the experiences. Among particularly some of the people from the East, things like stroke and hypertension was a little more, had higher incidence. And because, again, most people didn't understand the place of therapy. My mom, for one, lost 2 siblings during the bombing. Her 2 older brothers were hit by the bomb and they died. And so there is a sense that growing up, whenever you were away from home, she had this fear that you might not come back. So I saw that fear always just hang on her, right? Even when it came to choosing school, she wanted to just school by, like for her, there was always this sense that just in case another war breaks open, I want to be able to stay close, right? And now I understand the name for that. It's really post-traumatic.
PTS.
Yes, PTS. And knowing that it wasn't something that was unique to her, I mean, I saw it in a couple of other people, aunts and uncles that I kind of related with. So there was a bit of that, that still, I mean, now as an adult, I can rationalize and see in the ways that trauma played up for her, why she was a little sometimes overly react when you're saying, I want to travel, I want to leave the state, I want to leave the country. Because for her, seeing you was the way she defined safety. The impact of the Civil War affected their entrepreneurial drive, affected on a level the ideas of safety and security.
So limited mobility, you would say? There was
sort of, it was either limited or extreme. I had cousins that wanted to be away, and just because somehow and just coming away from an election where we saw the diatribes, we saw the people throw words and trivialize what could potentially be insightful. And because most of them have no context or history or maybe never had families that experience these things. So they don't even know that this is actually a trauma experience for some people and is a trigger. So when somebody would say an entire tribe should be thrown into the water, those people, there's a set of reaction that provokes, right? For as many people hearing that. And I think that for me, for most of us who solidly believe that Nigeria can thrive as a united country, because truth be told, division exists on many levels. If you go to Delta states, there are tribes that can't stand each other and they are in the same state. So it's not about dividing on the regional level. It's about educating people about the sense of inclusion and belonging, that the tribes are not our problem. You can have tribes without tribalism. Mm-hmm. You can have the context of ethnic groups without even degenerating into ethnicity. And that idea that a tribe is uniquely superior than the other takes away from the collective. We're all humans and there is equality in our humanity, right? And even in gender. So people shouldn't necessarily start to reduce that. So if we say, okay, let's break up and then go to different regions, you will still find that people are fighting even in their different states.
Even on those micro levels, yes.
So what we need is a mindset shift. It's an education that we all belong to each other and not about splitting.
I even feel like it would actually be in some ways beneficial that people are allowed to keep into their groups, okay, if they wish to have that freedom to just to sort of buy into the same way of life and to live your life however you want to, so long as you're not harming anybody else, right? Inclusivity doesn't necessarily mean I have to let go of what is important to me, traditionally. I don't have to walk away from my tradition to know that I'm including everybody else, but to have that equality that cuts across the tribes and cuts across the cultures I think that's where the education really lies. Because a lot of people, I think a lot of this comes from fear of losing who I am in order to include somebody or make somebody else feel comfortable. And I'm just like, well, why do we need to lose who we are to make you uncomfortable, to make you comfortable?
So I really think that that's actually an acquired illusion. It takes a certain type of not knowing enough to think that including someone is losing me. Mm-hmm. The inclusion doesn't mean subtracting from who I am. It's that accommodating that just the way I have the right to embrace my culture, my way of life, the way that I want, I have to extend the same tolerance courtesy, yes, and courtesy for the other people, right? But what we are finding here, it's almost that, okay, you are here, but you have to be less than who you are because you met me here. But the idea is not about, okay, my own culture is superior, is that my culture is superior and you're to me and your culture is superior to you. So the way I approach and honor my sacred culture is the way you honor that. And what we then need is cohabiting in peace, honoring each other's safe spaces and becoming each other's shelter as we grow a society where our kids can find a more expansive culture from which they can embrace. And it's not about becoming divisive or weaponizing the difference, but celebrating it as a gift in itself, and that diversity is a strength. As a storyteller, I'm working on a couple of stories, right? And I am excited to have this plethora of options to work from. I can create a character and borrow from Yoruba. I can create a character and borrow from Ijaw. I can create a character and borrow from Swahili, right? My point is that all of these beautiful portraits come alive in the tapestry of the stories. And what we then need to do is, when I come to storytelling, I look at what culture works best for what I want to create, and I'm excited to borrow from that. Because when we go out there to play football, people are not interested in, is it Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo? He's called a goal. Nigeria has won. Mm-hmm. But why can't we bring that attachment, that celebration into everything else that we do? If Davido resists the music, everyone's like, timeless. I love it. And I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, that he's not speaking my language. No, we celebrate excellence wherever we find that. So I think that what we then have to understand is the politicians understand very well that many people are not necessarily educated enough. So they always bring up this thing. Is he a Christian? Is he a Muslim? Is he from what part of town? Has he been zoned? So all these conversations on zoning are because we have not fundamentally solved the problems of inclusion. When we solve, zoning does not necessarily solve inclusion, right? What I think is important is that when you zone, people then compromise, and now it's not even about competence. It's about whose turn is it to produce the next governor, right? But I think that zoning that takes away from meritocracy will impact on the community even more so in a worse way. So I think it's not necessarily that the idea of inclusion is not so much about zoning when competence is not on the table. Is that when we sit down to design policies and governance, we try to design to be as inclusive as possible. If I have a tribe in my community that doesn't do something on Saturdays because it's their culture, I will ensure that day is honored in how we plan, so that it doesn't take away from them. They are not deprived. And I think that's the way it works. It's not so much about removing them or neglecting them, but taking that into our policy design. So most of the times, I really think our policies are not drilled deep enough to accommodate our nuances.
So your relationship with politics. Now, I know I can see the connection to grandma. I can see the connection to, your upbringing and some of the traumas that you kind of, the situations that your family sort of went through. What is driving your political purpose today?
I do have a very, very heightened sense of the potential of what Nigeria can become. I do think that on many fronts, I've seen successful Nigerians emerge in other parts of the world. When it comes to the quality of what we have, the resources that we have, we're a very endowed country. And on the other hand, I've seen the peril of the wastage that we find from people who can't put people first. I've seen what's the social cost of corruption and how that has impacted on the quality of lives of our people. And you can't stand idly by, right? If you have any sense of moral responsibility or courage. And my idea of going into politics has never been anything other than moral responsibility. I feel I own a person, I owe it to my kids and their friends and their generation that we do what is best to steward, whether it is through an elective office or whether it's through an appointment or whether it's through whatever the case. But can we put our best foot forward? I've been building a company for the past 7 years. And I know how painstaking and how demanding that experience has been. But I've built with some of the most talented, most hardworking people, and I've seen how we've come by giving our best, not because there were resources, but because we were our own resources. In just collaborating together, because collaboration, they say, is the new capital. In just coming together, we're able to scale in areas where we had challenges. When I'm down and I'm feeling low, I call my co-founder. He has something nice to say. When he's not going well, I call the other guy. He has something to say. And when they are going through their own season, I'm there to affirm that this is not the worst of it. We're out. We'll be out of this. And that's actually the energy. But I've seen what the studio has become in the last period time we've been building it. I've seen the international recognition. I've seen the awards we've received. I'm seeing the potential potential partnerships that are coming to us here in Lagos, because they are seeing the quality of the work we're putting here, and everyone honors it. I think we deserve to take the same kind of thinking, the same kind of quality thinking to Nigeria. Nigeria shouldn't be a country where people lead us because they are career politicians. Because when a country fails, it impacts on everybody else. And truth be told, if Nigeria is done right, just even ensuring that the environment is empowering for people to thrive, this country will be a much better place to live in. 13.5 million children not in education, that's actually very lethal. Because if you profile that 5 years from now, think of what can happen to streets where half the population are under 35, right? And you're talking about an undereducated army of people not in education and employment. You're creating a recipe for the disaster. And I don't think these people take into cognizance that buying houses in Dubai or buying as many nice cars can't even insulate us when the realities of life comes. What we need to do is to build a society where all that can actually thrive, where a decent man can aspire, get a business, and then take care of his family, where people can actually go to hospitals and get treated, where people can actually take their kids to school and they're educated. Right? The truth is that our educational system is a mess. A lot of the kids, they are not learning much, right? They actually said only 3 out of 10 kids are learning in a sense of a functional sense. So we have budgets allocated to education, and we have the output being subpar. And people are living with this reality as though if I was running a company and have a non-performing staff, I'm going to accommodate that. No, because you're accommodating that you're set the demise for the company. You do that at your own peril, right? So I think that more responsibility is something I need to urge everyone. And maybe that's part of why you go back home. Every one of us, we have a responsibility to rebuild our countries. We can think of other countries where people labor to build it. We can think of Canada. They didn't just become what they were.
Well, many people lay their lives down for a lot of these Western countries that we all aspire to go these days, right? Without fully understanding the history of how they became to be. I get a lot of comments on some of the content that I put out, and it's always, Africa could just never get it right. They just don't know that we don't have what it takes. And these are coming for fellow Africans as well, focusing so heavily on all our negativity and all the things that we just have failed in, and they neglect to understand that a lot of these big nations went through this transitional period.
Yes.
There were moments when China was seen as
a write-off.
A complete write-off.
Nobody wanted to buy their goods.
Nobody was interested. Nobody even thought they were capable of even doing anything. China was full of peasants as far as the entire world was concerned. It was full of, in some ways, how you would describe Africans today, right? Unskilled, no potential, not worthwhile even investing in, not educated. And now look how they've managed to just transform themselves in the last 30 or so years. So when we really think about it, we need to have a holistic view of a lot of these conversations that we're having, that these nations did not just birth themselves. A lot of lives were sacrificed.
True.
A lot of blood and tears were literally laid down for them to come to be. And that was a process. So I think we really do need to understand that even in Africa, this is a new frontier, right? This is, the rest of the world is pretty much hit its ceiling, and Africa is now the new frontier where people now want to invest, and they're thinking, this is really fertile land that hasn't really been used yet. So, and I really do wish that when we speak about these things, we're speaking from a point of view of not a scarcity point of view, but we're coming from a point of view of what is actually possible for us to have. What has been done in other nations? Where did they come from? Where are we now? How far can we also go? How far can we also reach? And I think more conversations like that, and less self judgment and just negativity and self-wallowing. I think that's a really good place for us to start first and foremost. But this kind of brings me to my next question. When you are building these multitude of different companies, do you struggle with really understanding where your energy needs to go when you're sort of maneuvering your various companies? You've delved into politics. You kind of delved a little bit in your pastor in some regard, right? You're doing the I don't want to say cartoons because it's animation, but some people are like, what's animation? It's kind of like a sophisticated type of cartoons for those who might not necessarily understand, a way for me to sort of break it down in simple terms. And then what else are you doing? I think what I came across was like 4 different things that you were doing.
Well, then,
and then there's storytelling and consulting on that level, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I did. I still do a lot of brand strategy because I'm very excited about building businesses. And sometimes when I sit with entrepreneurs across the table and I'm listening to their pain points, I think this is just a thought process gap. If you understand the thought process, you will be able to resolve those complexities. And gratefully, we've had many successes, right? So I think at the core, my greatest gift is not just the storytelling, it's the strategy part. I'm quite the kind of guy that can sit down and then just draft a strategy for the roadmap on where you need to take this. I have the gift of the big picture. I'm able to see it. But I think very quickly, I understood very clearly that I'm the kind of guy that lives permanently in the future. I'm always like, okay, what next? What are we creating? So
we probably have that in common.
Yeah, and I can be overwhelming for my team. Sometimes they look like, we're still trying to figure this out. Guy, you've moved. What are you doing there? Come down to this earth. But what I've come to realize is that I wasn't always a sole entrepreneur. I couldn't be, because I had so many very interesting and divergent passions that were always about the empowerment, creating value, enabling people, and solving problems. That was always all I wanted to do. So every expression that I created, I always found it team. My studio today, I have some of the strongest and most talented guys building it. And that code building has been a gift even to me, right? Then there is another project I got involved in, Gimmick. It's also a team. And my role there is pretty much even now advisory, right? I have like 2 other projects. There's Ultra, which is an edtech platform that I really started before handing it over to people that I felt were available and passionate about to scale that. And with every of this thing, I understand the place of teamwork, understand the place of partnership. I'm very self-aware to know my limitations and my strength. And as a leader, I tend to navigate my energy more towards my area of strength and always leverage very effectively on the best person in the team that I know is well equipped to be able to decipher or solve that particular problem other than myself. And I'm not the kind of person that I'm the leader and everybody else is a follower. I try to create an environment for co-leading. So while I bring the vision, I'm this person is leading when it comes to project management because he has the best capacity to do that. The other person is reading with creative artistic intelligence because he seems to have a way to shape it. So I recognize the intelligences of my team at any point in time, and I affirm them to say, okay, fair enough. Some of the best advice I actually get sometimes is even from it could even be from my driver. Like, okay, what do you think about this? Look at this. I could be from a PA. Like, what do you think about this? Look at this. And I recognize something that they have. And I'm thinking, okay, let's see how that plays out. Right. And I'm learning to leverage on that the vantage point. So I think that more often than not, our concept of leadership has always been about a Superman and a superhero, right? And the ego thing. And I think the crushing of the ego is going to make you a much better leader. Coming to an end of yourself where it's not I but we, where it's not me but us. And creating that entire platform so that the company becomes a platform where people are enabled to truly flourish and live out their dreams. And, when you are your ego, you realize very quickly best ideas can get out of the window. Your ideas will become the superior and the supreme ideas. And oftentimes it's not about who is bringing the idea, it's how you feel about it. And I think it's an unhealthy way to run a company because innovation in the age of disruption requires that it's about crowd intelligence. It's about the innovation of the crowd and not just the innovation of the one man. You might be the visionary, but once people buy into that vision, you are no longer just the visionary. It becomes co-visioning in the way that when they say, okay, can we add to this? Can we add to that? Invite their thought process as well. Let it refine. Because innovation is running. Like I will tell entrepreneurs, if the innovation in your industry is faster than the innovation in your company is going to be dated. And before long, you might not survive. But a healthy company is a company where the pace of innovation within your company is maybe at the same level with innovation in your industry, or even faster than innovation in your industry. So you become a pace setter, right? And every company has to self-disrupt. And whether it comes to the way your structures are built, when it comes to your processes, technology is never going to remain the same. You might go to bed in one world, wake up in an entirely different world. So your business model can't be rigid. It has to iterate with evolving markets, consistently asking myself, how do I position now to leverage, not to become part of the road, but to become part of the trend? And just having that conversation and having that outlook, you must have curiosity and a sense of experimentation. I'm very spontaneous, and it comes with a weakness and a strength, right? Spontaneity is that some of the ideas might be a bit too quick, not ready enough. But again, some of the best ideas we've had have come from there. I just walked into the studio when they were doing a voice recording, and I just said, no, how about you do this? Make it a whisper. And then suddenly, everyone is talking about the whisper. But it was just a 5 seconds walking into the studio. If I wasn't there, maybe somebody else could have come up with that idea. But my point is, we all must open ourselves to understanding the crowd intelligence, the crowd innovation, that together we are better.
Let me ask you this. So many of us entrepreneurs, we have a drive for this thing. There's a hunger that we have, particularly those entrepreneurs who are really tapped into purpose, right? There's a drive, there's a force that's typically driving us. And more times it's not coming from a place of light and love, right? Sometimes it's coming from a really dark place. What is the thing that is, let's say the thing that is chasing you? So you probably have an idea of where you're trying to get to, right? But what is the thing you're running away from?
Well, truth be told, I think that I have evolved away from that particular place. Right. And now when I think about having a very big student of enlightenment in my last 5 years, and I understand self-emptying, I understand shaping the motivations that motivates me. At some point, I was driving to ensure that I don't fail. and having to get stuck like my parents were at some point in their career life. So it's always about the fear of failure and the fear of success, or trying to, be the best or the better person in the room. Quite frankly, all of those, here is what I'll tell you. Every entrepreneur has a drive. That drive is agnostic. It's neither good nor bad. What feeds that drive, it's actually what underneath it can be, if your soul is healed enough to power that drive. A soul that is still inhabiting trauma will bring darkness to the drive. And that soul, in as much as you might succeed, you will become lonely at the end. You will lose good people. You will use people to build and never build with them. And you will become a prey. You will prey on their insecurities, or you will even be preyed upon by your own insecurities. So every entrepreneur, the health of a company fundamentally is going to be a reflection of the health of the entrepreneur, and the people who drive. If you're whole enough in yourself, it becomes part of that. If you have embraced light and love, that there is nothing to prove. I'm not driving this because I want to earn an approval. The accolades are powerful, but because I'm here to shine light and to give love to the world, and let the world be a better place where others can flourish. The competition is not the kind of competition that becomes manipulative, dirty, trying to pull people down, that we appreciate. It's sort of like a positive envy. You enjoy what they're building, and you're inspired by that to want to bring something, because the idea of scarcity has put us on a treadmill where we're trying to get others out for us to win. In the world of abundance, everyone can win. See, we've been fishing for years and there's still fish in the water. How come nature tells us you can't exhaust the fish, and yet people tell us opportunities are finite? It's because capitalism needs you to believe the opportunities are finite for you to think about it. But trust me, there are many ways to kill a bird. There are many ways to unravel. So we need to start advocating for conscious capitalism. What I mean conscious capitalism that is not about every means to an end, but both the means and the end is about elevating human beings. It's about human flourishing and allowing yourself not to become a victim of that which you build. Because if you have a deep sense of insecurity, you can succeed in that company, but no one can succeed you. And you keep yourself there till innovation outruns you and the company starts to decline. And I think why we are still yet to find many generations of companies that are in their second generation, many African companies do not get to second or third generation, is because the deep work of healing of the soul that can allow your company to transcend you is oftentimes compromised.
Do you think that's something that is a singular activity or goal, or do you believe that's something that is probably going to follow you for the rest of your career and your entire entrepreneurial journey?
No, I think it's not. I think for some people, they overcome that. I mean, at some point, people will tell you that Steve Jobs was terrible to work with. Like, he was terrible to work with, competitive, bullying people. But, after he went to Pixar and went to Build Nest, his second return met a different guy. I mean, he didn't lose all his demons, but there were a lot of them that had been contained. And the way he spoke and nurtured people wasn't now from the place of putting you down over amongst your team, was even a little more affirming, right? There are some entrepreneurs that haven't come to an end of themselves, right? I don't think Elon Musk is there. I think the guy is just having a good time, right? So, he's still very much one with whatever is driving him, and he will tell you the same thing. I mean, an interview, someone told him that, I want to be like, he said, no one should be like me. I'm crazy. I don't sleep, right?
Well, yeah. So it's interesting you brought up Elon, because his drive, I would not say it's from a place of love and light. Yeah. But the outcome of his drive creates outcomes that could be love and light for others. No, that's powerful. And the industry.
That's powerful, but there are some other things you might not see. Behind Elon's success is a train wreck of broken souls. And while the larger world is benefiting from the success of his innovation, there are many families that mourn the breakdown of their mental health of their loved ones. So they don't see Elon the same way you do. But I do know, will Elon have succeeded? Should he have treated people even better? I think so. I don't think that being a bully is the best way to get a result.
No, that's not what we're saying. We're not talking about the behavior. We're not talking about the behavior, because you can feel that you're driven by a dark thing, but you treat people well.
Now, see, every dark has its potential dark side, and nothing dark should drive us, right? If at all we identify that there's something dark in us that is driving us. For a season, maybe that's the only option we have. But I still do think that as we come to a place of knowing and self-awareness, we would be able to walk away from the darkness to light. Light is beautiful, not because it's just a reflection of good, because there's no shadow of darkness when you think of the light, right? Darkness comes with its own. Now, there's a different aspect. I don't think all dark is evil, because I think that dark is a creative space. But I also would say on a level that if that dark is a nurture of terror and fear, where you're deeply paralyzed by an innate sense of unworthiness.
No, now you're assuming that someone's darkness is taking them into a place of sadness. So when we talk about darkness, we're not necessarily talking about, oh, my story has been roses. We're talking about, it could be trauma. It could be something that happened to you as a child, and that thing has birthed something in you that now drives you to ensure that you never end up back in that place.
Let me give an example. Take a lady that was molested as a child. Something has left a trauma in her. Now she's passionate about the fact that no child should have to go through what she has gone through. She runs an NGO that is helping to get molested children into therapy. Right? Now, if at that point in time she doesn't disassociate herself from the darkness that bets that idea, what is going to happen over time is that she will weaponize her trauma. And there are moments and places and times when the different side will show. Because no human is designed to be sustained by trauma. But yet, trauma is a human experience. And the truth is that the people that then suffer it are people who do life with them on a more intimate level. Their spouses, their kids, their siblings. So I am all for healing. And I think healing is not just a nice-sounding word. It's an important part of the human journey. We're all on a journey of healing. Most of us not as intentional about them as we should be. But when you find some of the biggest movements today, do you know recently we found out that some guys who were convicted and sent to jail on the Me Too movement, some of them were genuinely innocent, but they were just caught up in being framed. And when the evidence was now piling up. But at some point, we couldn't think about it because we know women are coming from a place where they've been bastardized, molested, and all that. So the world wanted justice. And some people hid behind the trauma and brought down people that they wanted down. One or two of them will say, my friend told me that she was just all in this to get him out, right? I'm sorry, I think I shouldn't do that. Now, it's after the fact. But the guy maybe has done 3 years and lost his job, right? So what is important is that when we do not separate ourselves from our trauma, good can come out of the trauma, but the bad that can come out of it will consume both ourselves and even those that are intimate with us, because the human soul was designed to heal, to thrive in love. And trauma in itself is what has been done to us. Is oftentimes, but people now start to find identity in it, it becomes more tricky, right? Because when we are one with our trauma, trust me, it's hard to rationalize with a lot of people, and they can't see things your way. They lose businesses, they lose spouses, they lose job. Some good marriages collapse because somewhere along the line, people have become their spirit.
Imagine a factory whose core asset is its talent. A factory so big that its products are exported worldwide and is never short of human resources. This factory is none other than our beloved Africa, a continent infinitely blessed with resources and hard-working people looking for new ways to grow their capacity and create more opportunities in various industries.
Africa's furniture industry is one of such, valued at $282 billion, according to data by African Development Bank. Sadly, this promising industry faces significant problems, such as an unprofessional work mindset, significantly low and dwindling levels of competence or relevant skills. All of this contributing to substandard products and even more, unsatisfactory consumer experience.
Because we understand these realities and their impact on the industry's potential, we created Majors Academy, a robust and pragmatic solution for the industry with a mandate to train and nurture local furniture makers of tomorrow. We find and focus diligently on those who demonstrate excellence in attitude, competence, and capacity building. Majors Academy has partnered with best-in-class facilitators and industry experts across the globe to deliver classes structured to integrate character, theory, and practice. With an in-depth understanding of psychographic, behavioral, and aspirational state of young people between the ages of 18 to 25, we have designed programs that will equip them with the knowledge and the technical know-how to have a successful career in furniture manufacturing. Our integrated learning approach is designed to prepare students to be future-focused and technologically proficient to leapfrog and compete in a global market.
Our students are prepared for real-life work situations through the Students Industrial Work Experience Scheme, SEWES.
In order to ensure that our training is accessible and scalable, we are developing our online learning platform that hosts our curriculum in a variety of easy learning classes, using cloud-based technologies, automation, and AI to streamline operations and reduce costs. This will include using AI-powered chatbots to provide support to trainees and automating administrative tasks such as grading and feedback. Our virtual reality and augmented reality is designed to enhance the learning experience, stimulating real-life scenarios and providing virtual assessments to evaluate trainee performances. In addition to us leveraging technology, the Hub, a co-factory space, is designed for independent artisans and students to execute projects without the heavy overheads of machinery and equipment acquisition. We agree that our mission is an ambitious one, but might we add, a necessary one. On the one hand, we are training young people to become Pan-African professionals who can compete, deliver and redefine industry standards to meet contemporary market demands. And on the other hand, we are addressing the capacity and capability scarcity and gap in Africa's furniture manufacturing industry. An African adage says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together.
Majors Academy wants to go far, and we need you to be an active party on this journey to change.
Alongside this video, we have attached a deck showing you how you can partner with us in several capacities to build the future of furniture manufacturing.
We know that you need more information on Majors Academy and the great work we are doing. You can reach us via any contact details listed on the screen. We would love to hear from you.
Do you think that healing is an event or a journey?
I think healing is a journey, it's a process. And the thing about healing is a process is sometimes it can come through therapy, sometimes it can come with spiritual practice. But for many of us, it begins by understanding, first of all, there's something to be healed from. When we do not recognize enough, and some people will tell you, this is the way I am. And because they're already used to being that way, so they don't know that, take for instance, a man that is dealing with anger issues, right? He's driven by that sense of he puts it into a job, he's aggressive at work, he's creating, he's going up the ladder. But behind the scene, his wife is crying because he's abusing her. His kids can't stand because his anger and his short temper gets everyone scared. So out in the world, he's this huge, superimposing man of success, but behind the scene, right? So the family becomes the yardstick, not the corporate success. If you want to know the true measure of a man, look to his family. The impact of his unhealed trauma is felt there. And it's not always about the success. The success word, in fact, sometimes in capitalism, you might even be celebrated because you are not...
Because you're getting the job done.
Yeah, you're getting the job done at all costs. You understand? It's always about, sometimes people used as a means to an end, not an end in itself. But I'm learning now, when someone will tell you things like when you go to the grave, when you go to the bedside of many aging people who are dying, they'll tell you, what are your biggest regrets? I lost some precious friendship that I shouldn't have. But at that time, it didn't make sense to me. I kept the equity, I lost the friend. I kept the opportunity, but I lost the spouse. So we need to now start to recalibrate what our priorities are like. Our motivation must come from a wholesome place. And even while things that have hurt us have powered us for a while, they should never continue to power us. Because when they claim us, the train wreck is disastrous. And everyone that is in the wake. So that there is an important conversation that sometimes corporate world needs therapy. It looks like a rehab center, but people don't know. Some people don't need a job. They need therapy, right? Because at the end of the day, when you carry that competition into the workplaces, you understand there is no end. Some people can't go, right? Somebody was telling me that somebody took over, they were employed somebody. The person went into his email, started sending an email on his email account. And think about it. Somebody got a job, right? He's driven. He meets his KPI. But the best way to get is to pretend that you're a colleague, get into that person's email so that you can actually prove a point and then get the person out of... But my point is all of these things are because of scarcity. survival, right? Scarcity and survival is not the way to live life. Abundance, right? Knowing that the world has enough for all of us. It's such a liberating space. And if you lose one, be rest assured that God, universe will bring for you whatever you want. But don't subscribe to vengeance, making an eye for an eye, or thinking that somebody has to lose for me to win. And that has left the world in a very dark place, because the world we're dealing with today is a broken world. Right?
So this thing for me is very nuanced, right? It's neither black or white. There's a lot of very gray areas, right? So I think for me, it's when I think about these things and I think about the very gray spaces, and somebody is sort of going through something or something weighs heavy on them, and they've managed to tap into that thing to use it as a driver. And when we talk about, healing and we sort of express healing as something that you need to resolve in order for you to do anything substantial in this world, whether it be in the workplace or in your personal life and so forth. For those who very much believe that healing is a journey for them, and you probably would never, ever, ever forget your traumas. Let's be realistic. I think sometimes, we can be a little bit utopian in our thinking and in our expression. So it kind of isolates those who have not quite reached that point yet, right? So you're dealing with something, you're carrying this weight. And although you're actively trying to find your healing, you haven't quite got there yet. But you still have to go from day to day, and you still have to move forward.
Yeah.
And you're burdened by this thing, but somehow you've managed to use this thing and turn it into a driver for you that has brought about a positive outcome. And it's not always so black and white that, because you have an anger problem, you're abusing your family. Some people can have anger problems and they're not necessarily actively displaying it to their loved ones, but are finding other ways to express their anger. They get involved in, certain activities that will give them an outlet, or someone who's very self-aware, who would actively put themselves into therapy. But just because you're in therapy does not mean your problems have disappeared. And I think we have to be very, very honest about that with people to make them understand that we don't want you to feel as though you have not reached a certain level of resolve with these issues you might be facing because you don't feel like you've actually reached there. There's still a lot of power that you have in knowing that, no, I might not be necessarily where I need to be with my issues, but I can still go from day to day and I can still progress, and I have to take each day as it comes. I think we have to kind of create a safe space for that as well, because I find a lot of the time that usually is more the situation with human beings than I've gone through my growth and I've reached a point where it no longer holds me in change. Do you know what I mean?
Well, what I think is very important is the problem has never really been not having trauma. Every human is going through life with that. The problem is being powered by it in the way that you could also be blindsided by it. Some people are powered by it, but I'm actually saying that there is a potential challenge is sometimes you could also be blindsided by it. Blindsided by it where humans become the victim of the things that you can't see. And for me, I'm intentional about people. I think people, it's our greatest purpose. That the people in our lives are better because they met us. They are richer because they met us. They are whole because they met us. You don't want someone to be you don't want to be the reason why someone is in therapy because they did life with you, right? Yes. And so the point again is that even as a CEO, I have my trauma side, right? And I'm very impulsive with excellence. I want it now.
At any cost?
Yeah, in early days, I saw the impact on people. Mm-hmm. You understand? I saw the way I fired because I didn't like what it was, and I started to work my way back. My journey, at that point in time, I was legit. I was in pain because I would feel so bad about it, like this person is endangering me. But after a while, I sort of realized some of the things that I never quite saw, their backstory. See, the truth is that every human has their backstory. Every villain was a broken child. Mm-hmm. And many adults are children who are just trying to figure out the world as it is and how they found their place in it.
I think that's really beautiful for you to have gone through that side and found your way out of it to a place of clarity?
I wouldn't say out of it, right? Because you don't know, you might never truly arrive. You might arrive. I think it's not about agonizing over how fast you're going, but that you're going. But what I've come to realize is that now in my space, I am more intentional about the people in my life, and about the quality of their lives, and about the quality of their health, and being able to negotiate the space where my expectation and their performance can find the middle ground. And sometimes it's not about just getting them out. It's about sitting down to creatively find, do you need a new role? Do you need more training? Right? How can I make that work? And in humanizing that experience and not necessarily defining the person as their mistake, you're giving them room to also heal. Because some of them are not able to cultivate a certain type of performance because of some emotional handicap that they may have suffered as a child. Some of those things are still part of our human experience, right?
You're giving them grace?
Well, I think we all received grace and extend that. The world should be a gracious place, right? And so I do know that it's not something that comes easy because there's a cost to it that most entrepreneurs around don't have. I'm thinking of a training for a staff that is not optimal, that is not performing, right? But the training, again, is something that would add to your company's bottom line if the person improves, right? So there are so many insecurities in our lives that if we don't trap them, can actually drive our decision making. And some great companies today didn't get to the potential they were meant to get to because the CEOs got claimed by their traumas, or at least the karma catches up with you. And that's part of why I'm saying that in as much as you want to look at it, that it powers us because we don't want to make a change in the world. I'm also saying that underneath some of the drive and the energy, if one is not careful, everything buried in shallow grave that is not healed don't quite resolve. So it's really about being aware of it. So I would advocate more for self-awareness. And it's not about how fast you heal, but that you're also aware that I have a potential to hurt people if I go this way. Right? So I understood very quickly that because I was spontaneous, I could make a decision in 5 seconds that has taken somebody down 5 years. And while I've gotten what I want, somebody has lost who they are. And so it's in the space of world that needs us to be more human. Can we use an approach, even our HR policies, can they reflect a place where people are not just tossed in and out, but where people are actually nourished, and then helping them to find themselves? Because we underestimate the decay that is the Nigerian educational space. We underestimate the ills that is the religious space, where people go to church and they have sold a cheap hope that gets them to immobilize and lend helplessness, where they're not told the truth of becoming more applied in life. And then we meet them at workplaces and we're wondering why they're not performing. You're late in the game. This person has been for 30 years cultivated to be the way that they are. From parents who told them they were not smart enough, teachers who compared them with everything around you, and the lecturers that threaten grades for sex. And these are unresolved, multi-layered issues that these people show up in life with. And you're wondering why they're not doing presentation. And you're talking about your tenses are bad. Why are you not writing well? But that person didn't quite maybe have a good teacher that could teach them the use of English, right? So my point is, if we do not see the entire spectrum of things, people are going to be left behind, and I think none should be left behind, right? So sometimes I remember paying for a course, so much you can't learn it. But the point again is that now I do it more easily. But my early day as an entrepreneur, I was a little bit more Elonish, like in the way that, like it was not like it has to work, but there was a bit of immaturity in the way that I went about it. Now I'm a lot more mellow. And a little more and sometimes the little boy that I am tries to catch up with me, right? Where I try to rationalize how come, but I know I have more peace. How many years
have you been doing entrepreneurship?
7 years.
7 years.
7 years, yeah.
And what is the biggest mistake you say that you've made in that 7 years?
I think that there was a time we downsized in the company by 50%, and I think that process was botched. It wasn't.
It hurt a lot of people.
No, it wasn't thought through at all. And then we were legit because we had lost revenue, and then the bills were piling. So the option was we were very reactive. But looking at it now, I would do it very differently.
What would you have done different?
It wouldn't be as swift. It wouldn't be instant. I would probably try and do sort of like an orientation and bring people up to speed as to where the company is and why we need to make some tough decision. I would give some people the option of being on contract and coming when there is a job or when we can call. I would have some people who will be willing to take up pay cuts and want to stay. If that option is open to them, that will be happy to just walk through the journey while we heal. I would also be very excited to tell people if you're also open to resigning, so that you can help for a season. Like, there will be a lot of all those other options, right? But
more humanity.
It was a one size fits all, and truth be told, it wasn't something that I did all by myself. There were consultants, but everybody was coming from the same brutal corporate world of it's not working, cut it off, right? And so I think that was one of my biggest mistakes, and it brought something out from me, because when I started to interact with some of the people and what they thought about the company and how they felt like, I came here because of you. I listened to something you said. I came for the dream. It broke me because I didn't know how sincere they were. I didn't know how deep some people felt about it. So I realized the gift of good people must never be taken for granted.
How do you cultivate goodness in people today in your companies?
By seeing good in them, even when they don't see it in themselves.
And how do you articulate that? How do you make them see your heart in articulating
don't
that?
say it, show it. Don't say it. It's not said, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
In moments by moments, there'll be opportunities for you to show goodness. Take it. It might be sometimes someone it's not your business, but somebody just tells you, my mom is in the hospital and it's a tough one. I have to leave my and I know that this person that is going to home doesn't really have a lot. And for most of them, their parents are not on HMO. Even the HMO doesn't cover for parents, it covers for children and spouses, right? It won't be out of place for the companies. Okay, let's support you with something now. Can we support with this? It's very strange, but I do know that for some people, that might go a long way to show humanity, right, and goodness. So I think we should look for opportunities to let people know that we see them more. We appreciate them for all that they do, and therefore we will come through for them when we need to. There was even a time somebody collapsed in the hospital. There was at the time an intern collapsed in the office. And there was no HMO for interns, right? And we had to go to the hospital. We had to pay, right? We didn't tell them before the parents will come. We had paid. And I remember the following week, the mother came to look for us in the office and said she really wanted to thank us because something similar had happened in a very big company where they hadn't sent home, right? But my point, and then we're a much smaller company with not a fraction of the revenue. So goodness is to see good in people is to invite good from them. And that which we can't see, they can't become. And I think it's affirming that over and over again. Even the worst of humans have a good side that just wasn't amplified. And perhaps it's because we do not see them for the good that they are. Let me give you one type of story. Very interesting. I pastor, but this is just a bit of it. There was this good Samaritan, right, that saw a man left on the road. Guess what? The priest passed, the Levite passed, every other person passed, but this man that wasn't even a Jew, the Samaritan. And guess what he did? He looked at the man. The first guy thought, this guy is half dead. He's going to be dead by evening. Oh, sorry, I'm too busy. The next one thought, oh, I hope he makes it through evening. And he gone. This other guy said, wow, he blinked. I think there's a sign of life. Maybe he would make it. Let's take him in. So we must look at people not through the dead part, but through the sign of life. Right? That sign of life should inspire us to know that for once there is breath and signal of life, there is hope. That's the morale in the story. And I think for the worst of the people, when they are placed in an environment that nourishes that good in them, the good will thrive. And that's part of why whatever things are good, whatever things of good report, whatever things are praiseworthy, if there be any virtue, if there be any peace, think about it. So I have come to life seeing the best of people. If someone is going to cut me off in traffic, I don't go, oh, there. You understand? No. The first thing that crossed my mind, where is he rushing to? Maybe there's an emergency. I hope he's fine. A little prayer won't hurt. And I think just see the world for what it is. Truly, that guy might just be a badly behaved guy cutting you in traffic. But the perspective that you hold about it tends to send the ripple effect of love. And I think the world needs to be taught again how to love. We've sang about it. We've made it into movies, but it's still in short supply.
Day-to-day. And the day-to-day is actually always the hardest.
It's the hardest.
It's the hardest because you get so consumed with that day-to-day that sometimes we forget and we don't know the importance of maybe just having a bit of grace, even in simple things like traffic.
Yes. Do you know, I read this book by John Gotham. He spoke about emotional bank. And he actually said it takes 4 good comments to override 1 negative comment because the human mind is capable of capturing and retaining the negative. So in a sense, even in marriage, they said be generous with compliments to your spouses. because you never know when the negative will drop. So you already have an emotional bank filled up to take it.
Yes.
But I don't think it's something we need to limit to our spouses. I really do think that the world could benefit from a more generous, love-driven type of communication, where we are not just having to assume that people are intentionally trying to usurp us or get us wrong, and communicating not with a place of finality, but from the place of conversation. So it's not, you've been doing this to me, it's like, perhaps I think that this is what I think. I just want you to clarify, and let the conversation not be about one where you're decided and you're telling them, but you're inviting them to say, this is what I think. I may be wrong. Right? It's a dialogue. And I think the art of communication is not something we understand, quite frankly. The black man is very assertive. You've done this to me before. Yes, that, right?
There's a pattern here.
There is a pattern there, and they just generalize. And through this could be honest mistakes. And we just have to keep reminding ourselves that one of the things I'm learning now is to live forgiven. Like, understand again that before, just show up in life knowing that forgiveness is not something you give to others and you don't benefit. It's like the water that runs through a tap. When you give it, you get wet. And I think it's really about letting the world be a safe place where people can truly find themselves. Because at the end, you will not be remembered for the money you made. You'll be remembered by the people you blessed. Like,
the people that you helped, right?
So like, honestly, some people will buy all the land and then people are dying in the hospital. And you're like, so sorry, Pele. But the point again is this. Is the society that has conditioned us to always think that the best yet for success is what we earn and what we have in the bank account. If it's the quality of the lives of the people around us, and we can constantly fight our basic instincts, fight everything that resists that, trust me, you yourself will be great will enjoy the oasis of love that you're creating.
So this reminds me of actually one of the books that I read a couple of months back. In fact, it's The Art of Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And, it really is, and it touches on what you just said about we need to learn actually how to communicate, right? In a way that encourages dialogue as opposed to a diagnostics, right? Making a diagnosis about somebody's behavior without fully understanding the motivation and the rationale, and giving people the opportunity to actually articulate their need in their actions. Because every need is a request for, every action is a need for request, right? It's a need embedded in there sometimes. And sometimes we're very quick to just give a diagnosis of this person's behavior rather than just articulate, especially as a boss, as a founder, articulating in your reprimand what is it that you're needing right there, and being able to articulate that with a member of staff.
Powerful.
It's very powerful, but sometimes it's something that we have to be very intentional about, because it's not easy.
I remember someone said that to me once. He said, "Freddie, tell me what you want and I'll do it." And I just sort of realized I have not been clear.
Clarity.
That's my intention, but I had sort of assumed that he got it, right, and then started to now develop this resentment, like this is not what I expected and all of those things.
And that happens so often.
No, it does. And I think we could also be good listeners. I think there is that part too, where sometimes people are not listening to understand. They're listening to reply.
Yes.
Right. And when you get into that space where, okay, to finish your own now. They'll tell your own, let me tell my own.
What, in practice, it's one of the hardest things, because again, intentionality is really, really powerful. And when you're doing the day-to-day and everything has to move quickly and you're result orientated and you're waiting for this, you're waiting for that, and things are not, especially in Nigeria where you're consumed by the things that do not work. It's very difficult to give
sometimes
that, to
Nigeria
be intentional.
is almost like it's like a damage control or crisis management.
You're always in crisis management.
It feels like that some days. So it's very hard when you feel people are contributing to that chaos, right? But like I said, we must also see our companies as places of development, and even thinking about this right now, I also think in corporate world. In church, we teach people about communicating from a place of grace and extending empathy, because empathy is something that is so important to have. When you empathize with people, you put yourself in their moccasin and you walk a mile. Sometimes you will never be able to rationalize why people do what they do till you walk that mile in the moccasin. And some people are coming from places of deep starvation and scarcity and depravity, and they're coming into, and you're meeting them at a chapter in their lives where you don't know the backstory, but you sum everything to the first paragraph of their lives that you just read. You do an injustice to their experience and to their journey. So we must come with an expansive understanding. Who is this person? When they walked in with all that they were, their traumas, their experiences, their abuse, the people who have violated them. And whether you're dating them, they come with all that they are. They come with their baggage. And to unpack that thing, it's going to happen in the relationship. So how do we prepare ourselves so that when the unpacking starts, we're not going to just take the first door out, like I can deal, right? And that's part of why people like, oh, that's too much trauma. The reality of it is that love that cannot stand trauma was never love in the first place.
Yep.
For love must accommodate that the other person is human, imperfect, and must have also gone through things they themselves could not control or have no contribution to skew themselves or twist themselves in that way. But here in this space of love, they are fully who they are, and I'm willing to love them till they are coming to the fullness of who they are. And I think that is the gift of love, right? So we must not begin to, because we are not perfect, and yet we're doing life.
We expect perfection.
We expect perfection. I think there is a place of the crisis of expectation that most relationships are having. Unrealistic expectations where people just assume that it's happily ever after. No, it's work ever after. Every beautiful garden requires attention.
That.
No, every
work ever after.
Yeah, every beautiful garden requires attention, right? And no, I don't want to take away from any people who are divorced or separated, because I realize that some of them will tell you, I did all I could. I just didn't have the capacity to survive in that condition. And where their mental health has been compromised and they don't think they can face it, is human. We cannot vilify them for the choices they've made, right? But I also think that before we take our walk away, if you ever want to, you must ask yourself, what else can I do differently? What is my contribution to this failed relationship or to this failed marriage? And begin to ask yourself, maybe is it my communication part? For people that are passive aggressive, they're harder to do life with because you don't even know when they're hot.
Well, they're not open to dialogue.
They're not open to dialogue. They don't know how to dialogue.
Once in any relationship, whether it's platonic, whether it's non-platonic, once the doors to dialogue is closed, it's very difficult to move.
But you know, it's an upbringing. Most of them, it's the pattern of the raising, how they were raised, where conversations were not happening. They happen to bottle their feelings, and they don't understand that the feelings that you bottle, you never resolve, and the assumptions begin to play up in their head, and their thoughts become their truth. And they don't know that all you think about might not be true. That not all you think about, and they become their thoughts. Meanwhile, you're not your thoughts. You're the awareness behind your thoughts. So you're not able to interrogate your thoughts. You're not able to separate yourself, investigate, and ask yourself, why do I believe the things that I do believe? Right? So I think that's where most people need to get to be able to reclaim themselves. But the world will be a very, very beautiful place. And I think you don't want to impact on children, because even raising a child when you're living with unresolved traumas can also impact on that child. Absolutely. Right? Some people will live vicariously through their child, put them on pressure to perform, right? If your yardstick of success is that the most intelligent child is the most celebrated, every child who has a different intelligence that the school cannot assess, you will rate as unintelligent. I've seen some of the smartest people I know who are not academically sound, but they are smart. And I look at it, I'll tell them, like, I have a friend that I know that if I tell him, please figure this thing out, he's so quick with the computer, I don't know how he navigates it, right? But the truth is that he might not write me a letter, right? And that's not his intelligence. His intelligence is technical, right? And that technical intelligence, many schools didn't know how to unravel them. So I don't know if you've read the book about 8 multiple intelligences. And they say there is not one way. There is not one way to come. So the intelligences in the room are as diverse as people, right? Sometimes some people are kinesthetic intelligence. They know how to interpret movement, and they learn through motion and movement. Some people are intrapersonal. If you give them time, they will articulate their thoughts and come back to you. Some people are interpersonal. Give them in a social environment. They say, they learn from everyone. And yet, we didn't know this thing until 10 years ago or 20 years ago when it started to become popular. All we knew was arithmetic and literal intelligence. So if you're not good in English or maths, olodo, right? And people started to believe the lies about themselves and started to produce from the lie that they lived.
So let's say I'm an entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, who is just about to even entertain the idea of embarking on an entrepreneurial journey. What would be your 3 take-homes for me in terms of advice?
I think the first thing first is the why. I think you must want to clarify why this journey is important to you. Why now? Because sometimes if the journey is because I want to be a CEO, I want my name on a card, I want to be my own boss, you just might be signing up for what you don't understand. Entrepreneurs are not their own bosses all the time. Many times they work around the clock. Many times it's not 9 to 5. It's 9 to 5, 5 to 9. Every entrepreneur will tell you, because there's the pressure of having to want to pay the bills. Now responsibilities on your neck. So the why for me should not be about, oh, I want to escape my bad boss. I'm tired of answering to people. No, those are too cheap an excuse, because in life you have to learn those things. But it should really be about an innate sense of value you want to create. That deep sense of yearning and hunger to want to produce something that you know that the world needs. That desire to make the world a better place through what you want to create should be what drives you. The second thing again is that I would say the second lesson, less is more. And more is not always better. Because sometimes when people want to start, they try to just try to look at everything. No, take a step and then the stairs will show itself. Don't get paralyzed by, we sometimes overrate clarity. And I think for most personalities that are introverts, or most personalities that are analytical, they tend to want to just figure all the I's and dot all their T's.
Before they
but
move.
Entrepreneurship in Nigeria is quite, and everywhere in the world, is an unraveling, it's an adventure. And it's an adventure of sometimes you begin this journey. The model that you started with is a discovery. So come in with curiosity, come in with the childlike wonder of saying, okay, what's this journey going to be? Let me watch it unfold. And don't be stuck on your ways. Try to let the markets mold you, be malleable as you navigate that thing. And sometimes that's part of why I say less is more. That just don't get complicated. You're thinking, I need $1 million. I need $200 million. Maybe what you need is just to get started with the little you have. And then as you go along, you realize that you're learning. And you're learning through that process. So strip it down and take your first step. And the third thing about entrepreneurship is a journey that you don't want to go alone. Quickly pay attention to how you can find people that you can work with. Find a team. I'm very big on people, right? Your team is half the success of your journey. And if you can get the right people very quickly, you'll go far. There's this drive test that they tell us entrepreneurs in school. Like if you can drive with somebody for 6 hours in a car and you're not bored with the person, that's your partner. Yeah. Life partner or business partner? Oh, business. But maybe it can also work in a way. But I think that what they actually talk about is that you guys must, you have that alchemy between your energies, right? You guys have to feel your pulse together. The passion has to match. Because sometimes you find people like, I bring more, she brings nothing. I do all the work, he does nothing. So you find those conversations, right? Because somewhere along the line, they didn't do that 6-hour drive test. Now, don't make a dogma out of it. It's just a book someone wrote there. But I do, I tried it with one of my partners one time. We drove all the way to Ibejuleki. It was almost 3-4 hours going. Another 3 hours, 4 hours coming. Trust me, by the time we're done there were more things to talk about the following day on X and X and X. So I realized that, okay, there was that synergy of energy and synergy of spirit, which is very important.
Ferdy, thank you so much. That's a lot of take-homes there.
Thank you for having me.
Guys, I really hope that you have enjoyed this episode. My take-home really from Ferdy today is really understanding that at the heart of everything that we do in our entrepreneurial journey, the heart has to be present, right? The love for people, the intentionality for how you really want to embark on your experience with people and empowering those people along the journey as well is really what's going to make your journey not only enjoyable but fruitful. Because at the heart of anything that you really want to build, you cannot do anything, accomplish anything as a man on an island alone. You must carry people along with you. And really, our ability and the intentionality behind how we treat those people would actually speak volumes on where we end up as entrepreneurs. I really hope that you've been inspired by today's episode as much as I have been. And as per usual, guys, please do take care of yourself and don't forget to be extraordinary in the way that only you can be. Take care. Bye.